And we are live. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I will call this Intergovernmental Legislative Relations Committee meeting to order. It's Friday, March 10th, and I think everyone is here except for Mr. Rael, who can't make it today. So we're going to move pretty quickly to the first agenda item, which is the report from the dynamic duo on what's going on up at the Roundhouse. Joe, Mr. Thompson, Mr. Armio.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Hello, members. This morning, the capital or some of the capital outlay sheets were released, passed out of House tax. We believe there still may be little bits that appear elsewhere. I don't know if any of that will affect City of Albuquerque requests, but I believe it's mostly complete, and I think it's one of the better years we've ever had, so that's good. You know, I feel like as we go into there are some things we need to do now that we have the list, and I think there are some things we need to do on projects where maybe we were asking for a certain amount and we got significantly less to ensure against possible vetoes. And then I think we also should consider sending either one letter from the City of Albuquerque defending each project, or multiple letters from the City of Albuquerque sort of explaining projects, particularly projects where they didn't meet it. Maybe it's not entirely obvious that it could be phased, or the amount of money that has been appropriated.
Thank you. Did we just lose? I think we might have lost them both. I'm sure they're coming back on. So in the meantime, I will just say, and we would know better than, oh, there they are back already.
That was my bad, Madam Chair. I panicked.
That's okay. Continue.
So anyway, I feel like we did really well. I still feel like we have work to do, and we should probably, or you all should talk about something that we would do on certain projects where what we might send. Like perhaps each individual counselor would send just a letter that says, these are the projects. This one was supposed to be X amount, but it's this, but it can be done because of this reason. You know, something to take some of it. Now, some of the vetoes, line item vetoes, are political, and there's not much we can do about that. But the ones that are, we don't want line item vetoes that are based upon a misapprehension. And so to guard against that, I think that's something we should discuss. And that's pretty much my report that relates to capital, Madam Chair.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody with questions on capital before we move on?
Madam Chair, I have a question. I'm hearing two conflicting things. That the capital list that we received has the governor's items in there already, or it does not?
Madam Chair and Councilor Pena, I believe it's in there, but if you look at some of the projects where we know, like the governor pledged, let's say 5 million, and you see the numbers down at like 4.666, what I was told is there's a chance that maybe that sanding that occurred will be replaced in some other form, like in a severance tax bond package or some other way. I don't know the answer, so I'm just throwing out that possibility.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Padilla?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Joe, Mr. Thompson, how is this financed, and when will the money be available?
So thank you, Madam Chair and Mr. Padilla. So this was a general fund. They didn't issue bonds for this. And so the money is, I think I don't know the answer. I mean, typically, I mean, it didn't have an emergency clause per se, but I know they don't have to sell bonds to do it. So the money's typically available July 1st would be my guess.
And
If you know otherwise, please tell me.
no, Madam Chair, what we'll start doing is I'll talk to our DMD department, Mark Motzko, and we'll see how quick we can get some of these NOOs and all the other stuff that's necessary to get it done. See if we can start moving those. So when the money's available, we can start spending it right away.
Mr. Motzko.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to remind everybody we'll probably still have to get grant agreements with the state of New Mexico, whether it's DOT or Department of Finance and Administrative DFA. So administration. So just it'll be a little bit faster, but not as fast as I think we hope, unfortunately.
Thank you. But for sure, it won't be phased. There won't be the second tranche and the third tranche. That will be all at one time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to assume not, because this is the first time we've had everything funded with general fund money. So this will be an adventure for CIP and DMD to get these grant agreements out and then starting these projects much more quickly than usual, which is about 10 to 12 months after the bill is signed.
Thank you. And then Mr. Thompson, just timing on those letters that you suggest, it's a pretty quick turnaround. So when would you think that those need to be done? And I heard you say that you thought perhaps it would be best if it came from each of the counselors and then the administration on theirs. So we're looking at everyone doing their own letter, but what timing do they need to be turned in?
So, Madam Chair, any legislation that is passed in the last 72 hours of the session, then the governor has an additional 20 days. I've never seen a capital bill passed before that, because then the governor would have to take action. So, and then if you look at the normal evolution, they do the budget first, then they do capital, then they do the tax bill. The budget's still not finished. So, and the tax, so I think from a timing perspective, by the time this passes and is on its way to the governor, it will be in the last 72 hours. Meaning we would have 20 days, or, we could be working on our letters to go up right after the 20-day period begins.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions or concerns or comments on capital outlay? Mr. Padilla.
Madam Chair, yes, what we'll start doing is getting the spreadsheet set up so that we can figure out what our asks were relative to what we received. And then we'll be able to identify those projects where we think we might want to send letters. So we'll be working with council staff moving forward. As probably next week, we should have a spreadsheet done. And then from there, we can identify which things need to be, which we think need to be, letters need to be sent. And we'll share that with the council staff and with the counselors so that they know too. And if you see stuff that we missed, we'd like you guys to let us know so that we are all on the same page.
Got it. Okay, I'm not seeing any other comments, so let's move on to legislation. Mr. Harmio.
Sure, Madam Chair, members of the committee. So I think, as many of you know, the Benny's bill passed the House floor yesterday and is headed to the governor's office, the governor's desk for signature. Joe, you can correct me if I'm wrong. She'll have 3 days to sign that.
That's correct.
I suspect she'll be signing that in the next couple of days here. We have our warrant bill, which is House Bill 550, and then the Organized Retail Crime Bill, House 264, are both awaiting hearings in Senate Judiciary. They got single referrals, and we're hopeful we'll get those hearings soon so we can get those on the Senate floor. The stealth bill that we have an interest in, of course, in revitalizing that part of our community, is up in Senate tax tomorrow, where we hope to pass it and get it on the Senate floor early next week. The MRA bill, which passed the Senate unanimously, is in House Commerce on Monday. And we are working with folks from Las Cruces around the state to get that thing heard and on the House floor and up to the governor as well. There's other MCI bills that are in aid of law enforcement. For instance, the catalytic converter bill that will be up in House Judiciary. That's what I keep looking at my phone. They're on the first bill. It's the second bill up. and we'll be in strong support of that. The camera lapel bill, doing some cleanup on that for APD, is also making progress towards final passage. There are two preemption bills that will be up in government tomorrow that we've been monitoring very closely, and with the municipal league and other municipalities. The committee is well aware of our concerns about the intrusion on our home rule. That's kind of the highlights of where we are. I'm sure I missed a few things. We've had a whole lot of action. Damon Martinez has been at the forefront of our MCI program and has done amazing work, both in committee and on the floor as an expert witness, and really helping us advance the MCI package this year. But in a positive way, I think we're making great progress on the MRA, which will be very helpful to the Walmart revitalization, as well as the UNM South TID, which is going to really provide an economic driver for that community. Happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Padilla.
Madam Chair, thank you. Can you give us any update on the tax bill, the big tax bill that was actually had some stuff that would actually harm the city?
Well, that tax bill has been, there's a lot of coverage, and I think it's probably still being worked on. As far as my understanding is, the focus is no longer on the removing the quote pyramiding that was in the initial draft of the bill that would have impacted Albuquerque and other municipalities in significant portion. I think that is no longer part of the discussion, and the discussion is more likely now focused on other aspects of the bill, including the increase in the top pit and those sorts of things. But we'll be seeing that tax package, as Mr. Thompson said. It usually goes budget capital tax or budget capital budget capital tax. Budget's not done, tax isn't done. Capital actually looks like it's closer to being done than all of them. But as far as I understand, the current status is the concerns raised by the municipal league, as well as us directly through our entire team, on the impact of removing what they call the pyramiding business-to-business tax on Albuquerque was heard, and that is no longer the focus. I'm knocking wood because we still have 8 days to go or whatever.
Madam Chair, yeah, we've been in contact with some people on the committee, and we gave information to to AJ at the New Mexico Municipal League in case that amendment comes up. The other things, we were worried that we worked really well, but we kept the conversation going with the governor's office to see if we could find solutions, because we were worried just to see if we could find solutions. We think that was helpful, working with our lobbyist and with to keep that conversation going, because it was could potentially harm us with our capital. But it looks like that didn't happen, and so we're thankful for everybody's work on that bill.
Thank you, Mr. Padilla. Councilor Basan.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry to just go back just a little bit, but when it comes to the potential for vetoes and whatnot, I did notice that there is $70,000 that was allocated to Desert Hills for the $18 million request, and I'm wondering if we're going to just hopefully strike that and say take your money back, or what we do with that process.
Madam Chair and Councilor Basan, that's what we will do. We'll go through and we'll look at each one of those, and we'll work together, talking to the administration, talking to counselors, and say which one should we go for to save. I don't know if they have any other ideas on that, but that's the kind of stuff that we want to work on and we want to talk to them about.
Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Padilla. I highly encourage that be taken out from my perspective.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, Mr. Thompson, Mr. Harmio, you are certainly welcome to hang out, but I know you might be a little busy, so feel free to head on out, continue the good work, and we will move on to the report from Mr. O'Donnell with the federal lobbyists.
You guys, thank you.
Madam Chairman, members of the committee, All I really have to report on is that Senator Heinrich's submission deadline is today, and Senator Lujan's second round deadline is next Thursday, March 16th. Congresswoman Ledger Fernandez's deadline for project submissions is Sunday, March 12th. Congresswoman Stansberry's is Tuesday, March 14th, and Congressman Vasquez is next Friday, the 17th. I'm happy to answer questions that you might have about those deadlines or the eligibility of projects and eligible federal accounts.
Thank you, Mr. O'Donnell. That was the shortest update from you I think we've ever had. Councilor Bassan.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Do we know, can you give us an update, Mr. Menicucci, Mr. Griego Montoya, where are we at with the priorities that we're working on?
So, Madam Chair, before Mr. Griego starts, we've worked on it. We're looking at it on the council. Only one person asking for it is Senator Lujan, the only congressional member. But it looks like council will not be sending anything to Senator Lujan. The reason being is that the projects for the Senate we've sent to council to Senator Heinrich because he's on appropriations. Our understanding from Senator Heinrich's staff is that you probably want to just send to one or the other because of the way the appropriations process works. So we would be clear on that one. We will be sending, though, projects that we sent to Senator Heinrich to Representative Stansberry. And they were just 3 projects we were sending in, or 4, and to Representative Vasquez on that one there. So I think as far as we don't have any priorities to add to his list. I'll let Mr. Griego go. I came in first, so that way Mr. Griego could go in knowing that, you know, it's his list that it's the mayor's administration's priorities that need to be, or project need to be prioritized.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Tom, so we have been like council, we sent out a notice to all department directors. It's been a couple of weeks, just trying to start getting ideas for projects that could benefit from these congressionally directed spending. We got a long list. I reviewed it thoroughly with the delegation. We've been talking about to both of the senatorial staffs, and so those are the first deadlines. We prioritized public safety for the Lujan submission. So the projects we submitted to Lujan were all public safety. They all came from APD. They were things like the real-time crime center technology upgrades, the academy training and facility upgrades. AFR had a project for some dispatch diversion. We asked for some funding for the city emergency operations center. So those have all been submitted preliminarily to Lujan. We also, after talking to Heinrich's staff, submitted most of those same projects to Senator Heinrich. In fact, we're just finishing those up right now. And so those are, and it's a number of projects. What we were advised, Madam Chair, from delegation staff was that given that there's so many different possible funding sources, not that they have all the money in the world, but that they're trying to work with us to find subcommittee appropriations opportunities for all of these projects. And so we've submitted some additional projects to Senator Heinrich, including an AFR station for construction and upgrading that we've been working on. They're going to see if they can fit that into a particular funding mechanism. We've asked for additional support for the gateway. There are a number of parks projects that were part of either our CIP or our state capital outlay that we tried to put in there. And then, and so our understanding, Madam Chair and Mr. O'Donnell can sort of weigh in on this, is that they're going to try their best to match our requests with real funding priorities and obviously the senator's priorities. And then finally, we're going to submit a couple of these same projects to the 2 members of the congressional delegation, House members, next week as per the deadline that was earlier mentioned. So we'll get those to Representative Stansberry on Tuesday, and probably 1 or 2 of these that are in or partially in Representative Vasquez's district, so that they all have at least 1 project from the Albuquerque area as well. Happy to answer any clarifications on that, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, if I can follow up.
course.
It sounds to me like I thought we were working on figuring out what the city's priorities were to submit to the congressional delegation. What happened?
So Madam Chair, that's Mr. Gregor or to myself? I apologize.
Madam Chair, I don't know. I would like to know, and I think that, given some of our former conversations regarding priorities of the city, and that 10 members of the city are supposed to be in agreement of city priorities, I'm curious what happened in regards from then till now with now congressional. It sounds to me like we're splitting up. And I know I've had some conversations, but I would like to know what happened with that. And I mean, it kind of goes back to the original point that I made several months ago of why do we even have IGR if we're going to be doing counselor stuff and mayoral stuff? Why are we not working as a city together on priorities?
Who wants to answer, Councilor Bazan?
So
I'll take a crack at it and then so Madam Chair, Councilor, I think we tried to follow the same process the council did by putting the request out to I think all 9 councilors. I think if the suggestion is that all 9 councilors supported the 3 or 4 priorities that have been submitted on behalf of council, then that assumes they're on board with all of those. For us, we were trying to prioritize public safety, obviously the gateway, and then any other sort of smaller projects we thought we could make happen. The direction we got, Madam Chair and Councilor, from congressional staff was it is better, and again, there may be disagreement on this committee, but what we heard from staff is that it's better to submit many projects to see if we can get them funded, and to let the delegation have some discretion over where they think the funding is. And so that's what we tried to do, rather than Mayor suggested us doing the same thing. Should we do just a smaller number of projects that could be fully funded? And we were actually advised that that's not a great strategy, that we ought to be putting in more projects. None of these are pet projects. These are all APD, AFR, and trying to complete projects that are in the pipeline. So we're hoping that some of those will land. So I get trying to coordinate. I think if Mr. Rail were here, we were trying our best to sort of at least keep each other informed, but we also didn't want to miss any funding opportunities. So that's kind of the operating assumption that we had when we submitted all of these.
Madam Chair, Mr. Griego, so who's giving that advice?
Who's giving that advice? Congressional staff.
Okay, I'll make note. Thank you.
So, Madam Chair, usually how we do on the process then is, as you know, in our last, and we passed the bill, we kind of had this, because we had a debate when we were working on the rehab or renovation or rewrite of the IGR ordinance. This issue came up because this happens every year. And I think what we identified is that oftentimes what we're looking at when we do the IGR ordinance 3 or 4 months beforehand, and it's always hard to kind of estimate from the administration staff and our needs exactly what we will need. So we do it's more of regarding at least the federal earmark request. We've learned it's really mostly aspirational regarding the federal, because they're on different timelines extended. So we kind of have that list as aspirational. It's like in council, we sent back out to the councilors and asked them, is there anything you want on it? What we did get back from that list was youth shelter and Route 66 and Pueblo Alto. And I can't remember if youth shelter, Route 66, and Pueblo Alto were the 3, and those are in there. We have a 4th one that slips my mind that's also going in, and I can't remember it right now. Oh, it's the Southwest Police Station. I think that was also on there too. So we filed in from the council from that list 4 projects. We just verified with the councilors which ones from that whole list do they want to go forward with. And those were the 4 that came back. So that's how that works. Then what we do is, Eric can tell you from the administration point of view how they looked at that list and drew from the administration. I'll have to tell you that. Then with that, we then did was, usually what we do every year is that because there's these tight timelines, we'll then go ahead and do, once we get everything submitted, a supplement to the resolution we passed on the federal, I believe back in December. Is we usually pass a supplement to add in any projects that were added in, like Eric has some projects the administration does that were not on our list. We then add that in. We do a quick resolution. We'll probably we'll introduce it next meeting, probably if we have everything in, to go ahead and just add to the federal list of priorities from anything new. So that's historically how we've kind of done it on that one there. So I'll turn over to Mr. Grego, and he can explain how they drew from the list that was adopted in December for this list.
Yeah, Madam Chair. So, and Councillor, the language in the sort of joint resolution to try to sort of submit these with some coordination was to prioritize public safety. 7 of the 14 projects we submitted were all around public safety and came from projects that we talked to departments about. The other big priority for us, and just to be straight, for the delegation is the delegation visited the gateway. The members we've talked to feel pretty strongly that we really need to figure out to do everything we can. And as elected representatives, their choice is to try to put the resources where they think they're gonna be most useful. So we were encouraged to submit funding for the gateway. The other remaining projects are really kind of around parks, around there's one project that Senator Heinrich in particular worked with our staff and suggested that we apply for, which is a library violence prevention program that goes to cultural affairs. So I think ultimately these are not unlike what council set-asides are. These are decisions of the delegation. They like us to submit ideas. Ultimately, it's their call about what they fund. And none of these projects, first of all, none of them are guaranteed. So what my understanding is the next phase, and you all may know this, but is they're going to look at them and say, yeah, this one is not really fundable. This one we think is probably not one that is going to work this year. We may want to do it next year. So we don't expect that all 10 or 11 of the projects that we prioritize are going to be funded, but we hope that public safety will be prioritized and that the gateway will be prioritized. Those are the top 2 priorities in the list that the administration submitted.
Madam Chair, Mr. Grego, I'm aware of the process and how that works up there, but I was on board and listening until you started to say this is not like set-aside projects. What does that have to do with this?
These are congressional set-asides, Madam Chair, Councilor, these are congressional set-asides. That means they have a lot of discretion in terms of what they submit. So okay. we can't prescribe what they should submit. We can give them ideas. We can tell them what our needs are. But ultimately, and I encourage you to talk directly to the delegation, they were pretty clear, like, look, we want to support your projects, but ultimately we have to fund what we think are priorities, right? Based on all of the requests they get statewide for the senators and all the requests they get from the congressional districts. So these are congressional set-asides. We call them congressional directed spending, but they're earmarks, they're set-aside funds that the member has a lot of discretion in terms of what they want to fund.
Madam Chair, I was just making sure that you weren't talking about council set-asides. Thank you. Thank you for explaining all of that to me and educating me.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilor Pena.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Grego, I just wanted to go back to the process. I think, I just want to follow up on what Councilor Bassan was saying is that, when we're doing our priorities list, we prioritize, what councilors want, and then we condense it into what the mayors want. And we have one list, one resolution that has the city priorities, right? So this is something that we can all agree on. I think I'm repeating what you already said, Councilor Bassan, but I'm just to help me flesh it out in my head. And then now I think we're hearing is that the mayor just submitted some other things. And I think as part of an amendment we had done earlier is that's exactly what we didn't want to do is we didn't want to tie anyone's hands, but we wanted to identify what we could all agree upon as a city as to what moves forward. And then if the mayor or a councilor or I decide to submit 10 other projects, well, that's totally up to us. But I thought we were going to all be kind of singing out of the same sheet of music. If you
Madam Chair, Councilor, I think our understanding of that resolution, not unlike the language that is in the state capital outlay kind of agreement, is like we are going to try to have a common agenda to the extent that we can. And then we, each counselor and the mayor reserve the right to submit additional projects that they consider priorities. We have been clear about this list, that these are the mayor's priorities. I think the 3 or 4 that you submitted, I think are the council priorities. So if there's some overlap, I think that's helpful with the delegation. But nobody in the delegation has said to us, you have to have a joint agenda that's cleared by both the council and the mayor in terms of priorities, because there's lots of projects. And so that is not our understanding. That is not what I think what the resolution said. I think it actually says that you all have the prerogative as elected officials to submit projects that might be important to the city and to your district. And the mayor, thinking citywide on these public safety projects, certainly can suggest projects that we think are most important for the whole city. And that's kind of how those were the priority projects. As I said, most of these, more than half the list that we submitted are squarely in public safety. And then of course Gateway, which is our priority project for dealing with the homeless and housed issue. So that's kind of how we made our priorities. And then that's not to say we're not going to support what the projects that have been put forward by council. We're not saying we're against those, but if they all can get funded, we hope that's the case. So that's kind of where we are.
Madam Chair, so just to follow up, Mr. Griego, is that I think this is hence why do we have IGR then? Because I'm actually the one that submitted the amendment, and the amendment was so that we didn't tie anyone's hands, that we come up with a common agenda that are citywide priorities. And then, yes, I agree with you. If you want to submit 14 other, or I want to submit 14 other, we can do that. But when we're all rallying behind some specific projects to get fully funded, then we have a resolution that outlines what that should be. So I mean, it just contrary to what the intent, how you read it. If you read it that way, maybe we need to change that amendment. But the intent that I had was that we had a common agenda, a common policy moving forward that we could all support. And yeah, and if the mayor does, he wanted to submit additional ones. I recognized how that was tying our hands before, using the example of capital outlay, when the city has, our priorities, and then I have additional needs like park benches or whatever it may be, that I can do that just like the mayor. But I think it is, and I'll end with that just to say that it is kind of concerning that we have 2 different agendas for our delegation. I don't think it may not fare well for any of us. So thank you.
Any other comments? I have just a quick one. I just want to kind of echo what we heard from Councilor Bassan and Councilor Pena. It seems to me that what we have now is 0 City of Albuquerque priority requests. And I think that's a shame. I think that at the very least, we should have a few requests that are City of Albuquerque priorities. Mine might not have made it onto that list, but I would always support that City of Albuquerque priority list, but we don't have that. Now we have 3, or I guess I just heard 4. I only know of 3 city council ones, and then we have a bunch from the mayor, but there's nothing that says, here's what the City of Albuquerque wants. And I do think that's a shame. Mr. O'Donnell. Mr. O'Donnell, you're muted.
Madam Chairman, members of the committee, a couple of observations. Looking at the appropriations process, both on the Senate side and the House side. On the House side, members are limited to 15 requests. So when you submit requests to them, they want to know what priority it is. That would cause some confusion in the process that presently is being used to submit projects by the city. I only mention this because if you're going to submit requests to Congresswoman Stansberry and Congressman Vasquez, they do request a priority on their form. On regard to the Senate, and I want to make another comment about the House, because there was a mention earlier about Parks and Recreation. The Republican majority on the House side is not taking project requests for recreation projects or museums. So if you have them, they're non-starters on the House side. On the Senate side, one of the things that I think I really haven't had this conversation with either Senate office, but I think it's because there is no limit to the number of projects a senator can request. They can accept as many as they want or sort through a list and decide how many they want to include. I think the New Mexico senators approach this a little differently than, say, senators we work with in Arizona and California. On the scale that California operates, they don't ask you for a list of what you'd like to have them consider. They tell you pretty straight out. In fact, one California senator's office told us, if you're San Francisco, you can probably ask for 6 projects. If you're the city of Oxnard, you better think in terms of 1 or 2 at the most. So New Mexico's a different approach. And then I would say, I think all senators probably have those program areas, as Mr. Griego heard when he and I visited with Rebecca Vizia, Senator Heinrich's chief of staff, and she said, you know, there are some program areas where we certainly do have an interest in the area of public safety or behavioral health. They certainly, in that conversation, she certainly didn't say, if you've got something else, ask for it, but don't ask if it's not public safety or behavioral health. So and what I've observed this is our 3rd year, is local Senate staff in the state play a certain role, and I'm not always sure what role they're playing. They, I think, engage in some outreach, and I think they respond to some questions they're asked about where does a project fit. And I have noticed in the case of Senator Heinrich, there is a certain indication that this project is something that we're very interested in. And that kind of gives you a clue to the following years, what you might be looking at. But this is it is a difficult process to manage in terms of the earmark requests. And I think the IGR has done what it can do to try to sort through what the priorities ought to be. I haven't gotten any feedback from any of the congressional offices, but my guess is that their view is that this is a unusual process in the city of Albuquerque, and they approach it that way.
So, Madam Vice Chair, members of the delegation, I just make one slight correction to Mr. O'Donnell. We've been working on the forms for Senator Vasquez and for Representative Vasquez, Representative Stansberry today, and I just looked at them again. They do not have ranking requests on them. So at this point in time, I just read through it again quickly.
Well, let me just check on that. Excuse me. I'd asked Kyriakis earlier to check on Stansberry's form and Vasquez's form, and I think it says, what priority is this project?
Take a look on that one, because we'll look at, if you could, the forms we're filling out, it's going to be a little different.
And the reason they do that is they're limited to 15.
Okay. Unless there's, so this, again, we're just downloading the forms that are on the site. So. Maybe it'd be good to know, though, if they are. It says, why is this program a project a priority? Why is it a good use of taxpayer funds? So it doesn't ask you to rank it, but it does ask you, why is it a priority for your organization?
Is there a number associated with the priority question? I'm just checking to see
Yeah.
on the form.
Well, Madam Chair,
Have to rank.
Councilor Pena.
so according to what Mr. O'Donnell is saying, though, it does seem as though a more cohesive, united, smaller list would be more appropriate. And this is, again, if you want to submit 20, you submit 20, but I think what we're all three saying now is that we don't have a city-wide priority list. We have a mayor's priority list and we have a council priority list. Even though there's some cross-reference, but yeah.
Thank you, Councilor Pena. Well stated and true. Anybody want to comment on that or anything else?
Madam Chair, just one suggestion is we have not submitted our request to the House members. So those are due. We wanted to get to the preliminary deadlines for the Senate staff. So that's what we've been focusing on. If this committee would like to, and we can certainly send you the ones that we sent. If there are any of the projects on our list and vice versa that we can say to Representative Stansberry and Representative Vasquez, since they have a much smaller set of priorities these are our common priorities, then I think that would be one way that we could try to at least coordinate on the House side. Again, I just will say that the delegations encouraged us to submit not a small list of projects, but actually as many projects as we thought were viable projects that they could help with. If that's not what council was told, then I think that's probably a conversation that folks should have with the delegation members, because they're trying to figure out how they can fund as many projects as possible, given their different appropriations committee requests. But I do think we could certainly share our list and see if there's a possibility, since we have not submitted ours to either Vasquez or Stansberry, of maybe having a joint list of a few from our common list to submit jointly as common priorities that IGR sort of can agree are common.
Thank you, Mr. Griego. I would certainly like to see that list. And I don't see any other hands up. So I will just say, for me, the issue isn't that we shouldn't put in as many as we want. I don't believe that's what any of the counselors are saying. I'm saying that it would have been nice if we had a list that were a city priority list that would go in as such, and then additional ones. If I wanted to put one in for District 7, that would be an additional one. If the mayor had an additional one, it would be additional mayoral request. But it would be, I think, helpful, not only for the House, but it would have been helpful in the Senate too, and in the future, to have a list that is narrowed down, that is a city of Albuquerque priority list. I really do believe that is kind of the point of having IGR. So I'd love to see that list for the House and see if we can, make some agreement on at least the submissions to Representative Stansberry and to Representative Vasquez. Mr. O'Donnell, I saw your hand go up. Sorry.
Yes, Madam Chairman, members of the committee, Tom is right. The form did not ask for a priority ranking. On Mr. Vasquez's form, it says, what priority, why does this project have a priority? So you have to be able to explain that. But let me say this, that goes back to what I said about the two senators being able to ask for as many projects as they want. I believe that probably the House members have gotten rid of, because they did ask the first 2 years to rank the number of projects priority in your overall list of requests. But again, I think what the elected officials here have decided is that they want to have the flexibility of picking projects. That's what I see reflected in this. Send us as many projects as you want, or not asking for a priority ranking of a project in their request, because it gives them more flexibility to do this. I will observe this. I am surprised that offices, this really only applies to the Senate, really want to sort through as many projects as you want to send them. But I'm guessing that they feel they have the staff to sort through those projects and identify the ones that they believe are priorities or fit with the interest that the member has in funding projects.
Thank you, Mr. O'Donnell.
Madam Chair, a quick
Yes, Mr. Minicucci.
point of, I guess, next procedure. So if we receive the list from Mr. Gregos, to be able to stay within the Public Open Meetings Act process, my guess is the best way to do it would be Mr. Grego would have to get the list to us. So I guess we can get to council staff or all the IGR members, one of the other two, this afternoon. Then during the weekend, because again, Representative Pat Stansberry's requests are due Tuesday, and Representative Vasquez's are due Friday. Because we can't really schedule, we don't have enough time under Open Meetings Act notification to schedule an IGR meeting before then. Because our Friday meeting, we do have a meeting on Friday, but that's at 3 o'clock Mountain Time, and that's when the Mr. Vasquez's would be doing Eastern Time. So basically, the members would have to look through it. The three counselors, Mr. Real, Mr. Grego, Mr. Padilla, would have to review it. Kind of, I guess, send Mr. Grego and myself what they, or Mr. Grego acting as a staff at that point, send us what you think your priorities are. And then we would kind of have to just kind of combine them, kind of, where we kind of get a joint list. I gather you could talk to each other over the phone, whatever's allowed, under the Open Meetings Act. And if you all, do 2-on-2 or however that's act, I don't know how it works, during the weekend and kind of maybe come to consensus. And then, kind of what you think is your best choice, and each one make their own choice. And we'd have to kind of combine it, kind of rank it the best we could from what we were told and get a list. I mean, that's the best I could think of, being that we're stuck under the Open Meetings Act notifications. And then we could proceed from there.
Thoughts? Okay. I guess I would say we should try that. I'm not sure that given that timeline, we're going to have agreement, and there's no opportunity for group discussion as we should have had. So I guess let's try that and see if there's any that are overlapping for all members, then we can say that is a city priority. And if there are none that are overlapping for all members, we will continue down these parallel paths of council doing one thing and administration doing another.
Okay, so Madam Chair, just to clarify, when we get back the list, if all the members have said of the IGR, the 6, that we think this is a priority, then, or do we just take it from the counselors? All 6 members, or the 3 counselors, and I'm assuming, maybe it's all 6, let's just say all 6, say this is a priority, then those are the ones we put as the city priorities.
Right. I mean, I'm envisioning, and please, anyone else jump in, I'm envisioning a spreadsheet that lists all of the projects, and then there's a checklist for this is one of my top 5 priorities, and each counselor fills in which they think their top 5 priorities are, and then the other folks from the administration do the same. And if there's one that has a check box from all of us, then it becomes a city priority. Given the short time frame, I don't see another option here.
Okay, so with that said, then we'll get it to you. If it comes in a spreadsheet to us at council, we can format it quickly tonight and get it to you tonight. If it comes in a Word, I don't know whichever format Mr. Grego has. If it's a Word format, it might not be till tomorrow morning that we'll get it out. So we get it into a spreadsheet for you.
All right. Any final comments, questions, thoughts?
We'll send it, Madam Chair, we'll send it's a Word table, less of a spreadsheet and then a Word table. So I can send you the final kind of combined list we have after talking to congressional staff and so on, and kind of trying to keep it to the numbers and the requests we had that focused on public safety. So I'm happy to send that. I'll send that to you. Should I just send it to you, to Mr. Minicucci, or should I send it to the three counselors directly as well.
Does it include this council projects as well, or just the mayor's? Okay.
Oh, no, it's just ours. I don't think we've added the other three so
So-
I mean, so I'll send it to Tom and then
Yeah,
he can.
I think you need to send it to Mr. Nakuchi so he can add in all of them, and we'll have a complete list.
And then,
Okay.
Madam Chair, one more, just operational point is that when it's time to send them, because the actual applications don't ask for a priority, they say it's a city priority, a giant city priority. I'm guessing, would we want to somehow fit it in the application, or do you want us to send an individual letter to each of the two members saying, we sent you these applications and these particularly are our priorities? Do you want us to have that sent to them?
So my preference would be, and I'm looking to make sure no one else has preferences, but my preference would be, first of all, let's see if we have anything that overlaps. I'm not convinced that we will, but if we do, we should mention that in the form itself where it says, why is this a priority? We should say, this is a priority for the city of Albuquerque because,
On that one there. So we can say this is considered a city priority. And then if a project that we're submitting that is not a city priority, I guess on that priority thing, we'll find some language to kind of explain that one too.
yeah. Okay. I don't see any other hands up. Gonna give a second here. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I hope you have a great weekend. I'm gonna adjourn this and we'll see you next week.